Hello, on tonight's show we discuss a teenager that has gone back to school in the same trousers that led her to a 3 day not going to school because of what she wore. So that Gouch is talking about how expensive uniform can be in the year of 2021. Also, we discuss a charity celebrating its village after some devastating news, and we talk more into that, find out a bit more later on in the show, and we finish on the subject of bad driving. And is your partner a bad driver, and would you be brave enough to tell them? All that on tonight's show. Is Rachel Penny, Dana Ranson, and Vicky Pearson. Hi. As we talk about on tonight's show, a Lincoln teenager returns to school in the same ankle grazing trousers that led to a 3-day absence. So we talk about, do you think schools should ever provide a second-hand shop? Also, we talk about firefighters from a village in Lincolnshire that are fighting back after a terrorist attack. But we talk about the death sentence and if it should be brought back to the UK. And we finish on the subject of the Imp Trail in Lincoln as damage is done by a lorry. So we all talk about if we all think we're good drivers, and would we tell our partner or friend that they are terrible? All that and a lot more on this week's Loose Linc. Good evening, panel. Hi, how are you doing? Are we all right?
Good. I'm good.
First of all, welcome, Gaynor. We've got another new panellist. Welcome to the show. How are you? Welcome to the family.
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you. Good to be here.
Get ready for conversation. It's always fun on this show, always. Rachel, you're looking very nice this evening, gotta say.
Oh, that's okay. I'm smiling. I'm trying.
You're smiling. Make sure that smile stays on your face all week. And as you know, we are guided by a celebrity that set up I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. As you can see, she's in the shack right now, waiting to talk to us. Hi, Vicky. Can you hear us?
I can, and I've just proved to you I'm not in a shop. I showed you the room. It isn't what it seems.
So we start this week. It's a pleasure to be back. We apologise for last week. We did have technical difficulties, and it was a bit of a letdown, really, because it was our first show back the week before. So we are pleased to be back on your screens and entertaining you. We've got lots to talk about this evening, so stay in tune. But as always, as we always say, you are the fifth panel member out there. So we go back to 2 weeks ago polls, and we give the results. So, as a nation, are we good at queuing? Do you think British people have patience? 57% of you said no, 43% of you said yes. The second poll, should an age gap in a loving relationship matter? 94% of you said no, I'm in that category, I'm so in that category, and 6% of you said yes. And the final poll of 2 weeks ago is, if sentences were more severe and fitted the crime better, would crime be less committed? 37% of you said no, 63% of you said yes. As you know, we come back with lots of conversation and joy, and we are thrilled to be back. I was going to repeat something, but I remembered I said it in the first show, so I don't have to say it again. So we go on to topic one this evening, panel, as a Lincoln teenager returns to school on Thursday. So Thursday of this week in the same ankle gazing trousers that sparked off a controversial debate. and a 3-day absence earlier this week. So this story goes into a little bit about a teenager that returned in the same trousers after the school break as the time before, and school didn't think they were appropriate. There was a 3-day investigation into it, and after 3 days of a teenager missing a 3-day absence from school, she won the fight and returned in the same trousers. But it did get me thinking about uniform. So, Pamela, I'm going to talk to you about uniform. So, Rachel, let's go over to you first. Do you think when it comes to uniform, it's too expensive and has got out of hand?
Well, when you think about the amount that you get for child benefit, the child that goes to secondary school especially, they're probably the first child. So they get possibly, what is it, £84 a month, something like that. That doesn't even cover their uniform really for one set of uniform. Yes, you'd only probably have one blazer just for the basic set. But I do think it has got quite expensive. But when you think about the child is going to be wearing that 5 days a week, it's got to be durable. It usually is. It's usually very well made. You can get it online, but when I looked online today to have a look at prices of uniforms, they're all quite similar throughout the country. They're all about the same price. There's only about a few pounds in it of primary and for secondary, but it's half the price for primary. It's about 40 to 43 pounds for a set. But you see, the child's going to have 2 sets at least for the week. So it's quite pricey, but then you fall into the category of everybody's the same. You got to be the same to get for the child to go through school life happy. And when I was at primary school, we didn't have a uniform at all. But you see, then my mum didn't have the problem that what you're going to wear today. There's pros and against, but there should be something like there's plenty of groups on Facebook. There's plenty of groups for buying and selling. Why don't parents if it's such a problem, why don't parents set up a group so you can swap, or you can put your clothes and gift them, or something like that. That could work, I think.
I think some of the problems that I have with the whole school uniform, and I'm pro uniform, so I think uniform is a good thing, but I think it's the things that as parents we're required to buy that don't get perhaps the wear out of them that we hope. So an example of that is when my son was at school, we had to buy a rugby shirt that was probably about, I can't remember exactly, but about 40 or 50 pounds. And he wore it literally just a couple of times, such a waste of money. And so, while I think in essence, the baseline uniform is great, I think just some of the stuff that is on the list just seems such an absolute expense and a wasted expense that they're not wearing regularly. So, tends to be around PE kits and those kind of things that sort of cause a little bit of financial, that I think they're the things that cause financial difficulty. So
when I was in primary school, we didn't have a uniform, and there was a lot of issues. I mean, we had a couple of children that were from quite wealthy backgrounds. It was coming off the back of the miners' strike, so some children were struggling to even have shoes on their feet and were wearing like the cheap pumps and wellies and things like that. And the uniform at that point took a lot of the stress and the bullying situations off children who maybe weren't wearing all the designer labels at that time. And I think that was really positive. But at the time, it was just some black trousers, black shoes, and a blue jumper, and it could have been got from more or less anywhere. I think they used to specify whether it was a sweater neck or a V-neck jumper or something. And I think that's fine. I think if they're being so strict, I mean, if a girl's been sent home because their trousers are too short, I just find that outrageous personally. I don't really see a problem with it. I've seen comments in the media recently about, how it's distracting for male teachers, which just brings in a whole new argument. I mean, it's ridiculous that ankles is a situation anyway. Children is a situation anyway, and I mean, I'm a big supporter of things like second-hand uniform shops or kind of hand-me-down sort of stuff, and maybe making that a more normal situation, you know, so that no one feels that they're one of the poor kids that has to have a second-hand something or other. But I mean, the other one is blazers. I mean, we never had blazers. We just had a shirt in secondary school, just a shirt, tie and trousers, and you could get your shirt from anywhere, you could get your trousers from anywhere. There was a school tie that was about £8, which is probably a fortune back then looking on it, but you know, that it was pretty simple. Whereas if you've got PE kits and you've got, you know, trousers that have to not show any ankle, or, you know, I mean, kids shoot up. I mean, I've got an 11-year-old that just he grew, I mean, he went up 3 shoe sizes in one go. I don't even understand how that's possible. You know, I mean, how are you going to deal with this age of child, aren't you? And, you know, I think there needs to be a bit of leeway there. And I think maybe, you know, not having the expensive blazers and the expensive personalised stuff, although it's nice, is it an essential?
Well, I didn't even quote shoes in that. So the shoes on top of that, it does turn out to be very expensive actually. But I do agree with uniforms. I'm like, again, I'm pro uniform, definitely.
When my daughter was at high school, my daughter's very tall, and so she was at high school, had a blazer, and because she was very tall, she's very tall and very slim, so she's the, you know, sort of like the epitome of the perfect figure, but had a blazer that was too short in the sleeves, because to fit her everywhere else, you know, it would have bought something that fitted her in the sleeves, it would have absolutely buried her body. So she used to wear the sleeves just slightly sort of pushed up, so that it didn't look like she had sort of half-mast sleeves. And the teachers used to get really cross with her to tell her to pull her sleeves down. And there was one very sympathetic teacher who thought we couldn't afford a bigger blazer, and so offered her one as sort of, you know, second-hand blazer. But the rest of them gave her a really hard time and used to tell her off and tell her to pull her sleeves down. And in actual fact, what she was doing is doing it that way so that she actually fitted in, because it was difficult to get uniform to fit. So I think, you know, while I'm pro uniform, I also recognize that one size doesn't fit all. You know, there are sort of weird sort of and wonderful exceptions to the rule. You know, our children are individuals as well, so there's got to be some...
it's slightly ridiculous. I fear, I actually know, I've got, as you all saw on the very last episode of last season, I've got a 1-year-old. Not mine personally, but I'm an uncle, and I do fear about when they grow up and when they start to get, like, I've got a friend that just before the summer, and all they bought to begin with was the school blazer, and the school blazer was £70. Well, that is just absolutely ridiculous. And I remember, even in my day, you could go into well-known supermarkets, obviously we can't say names, but well-known supermarkets, and pick up polo shirts and pick up jumpers, and you could wear stuff like that. Do you think it's a bit of a rip-off these days, the school uniform?
I think we're in a situation at the minute that children aren't even having 3 meals a day. So, you know, I mean, sure, that should be a massive priority, you know, and free school meals is a huge talking point at the minute. So if you're then asking a group of children that are struggling to be fed 3 times a day for their parents to spend £70 on a blazer, I mean, it just speaks of a massive disconnect between understanding of the real world and those people making decisions.
Yeah, because there's nothing left of the child benefit once you spend it all on that and shoes and when I looked a couple of weeks ago, my niece needed something, and we went online, and I wasn't really particularly looking, but I remembered it today, so I went back and it was online, like a direct catalogue, showed you all your primary schools, all your secondary schools, and they're all similar prices. So where your friend got a blazer from, I really don't know, because they're all about £22-25.
It was one of the official school blazers, so they got it from the official school that they come from.
You put your school in, and it lists all the schools in the areas. And
yeah, what I'm saying is, though, if you go directly through the school, sometimes if you don't go on like a website like that has all different kinds of schools. But if you're I don't know, say like you're a parent and you decide you want to support that school and support and get the uniform through them, which my friend wanted to do, that's when schools can almost rip you off to the point of just pardon.
They should be cheaper. I'm sure they should be cheaper.
It's shocking, isn't it? But let's go on to the second question. Vicky, do you think every school should provide a second-hand shop?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think at the moment there's a real need for it. You know, I think another aspect also is one of the number one items to be thrown into landfill at the minute is secondhand clothing that people buy and throw away. We're in a very kind of throwaway culture at the minute. So even taking money, taking class, taking all of that away from it for environmental reasons, it is a really good way to get people used to the fact that clothes should be and can be reworn and repurposed. And, you know, there's no shame in using shops like that and charity shops in general. And I think that would go a long way in helping, you know, any family that is struggling and, you know, trying to make it more normalised, I guess. I think it's really, really important. And I know a lot of schools do it. I mean, I work with a lot of schools. I work selling school books to different schools, and there's a few I've gone into, and, you know, and I've seen their second-hand school shop in action, mainly primary schools I've been through. So I know a lot of them do it, and I definitely think it's something that should be done more.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying. I think schools have got a responsibility to offer that service, and I suppose, you know, if they're already my children are grown up now, so I'm not entirely sure. I know they didn't do that when you know, when my children were at school, that it wasn't the norm to have a second-hand sort of shop. But I did used to see it quite a lot, and I still do. People asking for, you know, has anybody got a jumper for such and such a school, and so. But I think you've got to be quite proactive. Whereas I think if schools were offering it as the norm, you know, that'd be quite a nice service actually. So and I think it wouldn't single people out. It would just be there as yeah, you know, it's what we all access. It's the norm. There's no stigma attached to going getting somebody's jumper that they had last year, because they're just happily sort of shared around. So
we used to use a lost property like that.
Yeah,
My school used to have a lost property cupboard, and if somebody came without a jumper or lost something, they'd go and find something their size and pop it on. But, you know, it should be the norm. It should be easy to access secondhand bits from school.
That was a punishment for us in PE. If you forgot your PE kit, you'd be made to go in the lost property bin.
Yeah.
So yeah, that taboo needs changing.
I used to deliberately leave my PE kit at home.
Really?
I hated it. Do you know, I love fitness nowadays. I'm very much this is a completely different topic, but it's the beauty of conversation, isn't it? That I all of my life I've had body issues, real big body issues, and eating and everything like that. And for me, I now say I know I've got a problem with food, and I deal with it. I try and fight that battle every day. But the thing is, I'm well into, I've got to be in a certain waist size, I've got to do this, that, and the other, and I've got to, but fitness and going to the gym, I go to the gym and I run and I bike and I do all that. But the thing is, when I was in school, I hated it. I just hated the all getting changed in one place and all playing a sport that you don't really, you're never going to watch, that you're never really into. And it's a whole different topic though, that is, isn't it, really? That's a whole different topic.
I think we've probably all got PE stories we could share at some point.
Sure we have.
I was in every sports team in school and stayed after school all week to play sport. I
really?
Oh yeah.
But I'm sure we've all got stories of behind the bike sheds as well, haven't we, really? I'm sure that. Look at Rachel. I am subdued on this panel, and I would never do anything like that.
The worm turned when I turned 40.
Dana, do you think, this is a really controversial question, do you think every school, do you think we should get rid of uniform altogether, or do you think it's still really important to have it?
Yeah, I'm definitely pro uniform, so I think we should keep it. Definitely don't get rid of it. I think it's important. I think we all want to feel part of something. It's part of that sense of belonging. It stops people feeling different. You know, we talked earlier about different levels of finance and wealth. You know, I think as soon as we take the uniform away, that means that it starts to become very competitive between young people. It already is competitive, I think, between young people anyway. They try to you know, sort of bring their own individuality into the uniform, which tends to get them in trouble. But I think, as far as a blanket, should we keep it? Should we get rid of it? You know, my husband is ex-Royal Navy, so as a good Royal Naval officer, you know, he would be absolutely abhorrent if I said get rid of it, because he just thinks it's, you know, and it was part of his makeup. You know, it was a sea cadet before that, and so for him that uniform was really, really important. It sort of helped him identify his tribe, if you like, and I think that's the same with school. I think, you know, we get that sense of who we're connected with. So, you know, I know as a pupil I hated wearing a uniform. It really wasn't something that you know, but I didn't kick against it. But, you know, given a choice, would I have said I'd wear my own clothes every day of the week? Yeah, but you know, but I think, you know, it certainly gives you that sense of belonging. So I would be in the pro let's keep it camp. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think children can see a difference from a very early age, and I think if they have a uniform at a very early age, it gives them a sense of belonging to that group and a sense of pride as well. And also you can tell which child comes from which school, and they're proud to wear a uniform, I think, most of the time.
I think it's a massive help to things like newsagents, when kids are nipping off and trying to get, I mean, a crafty fag was our thing, I think. And you know, I think a school uniform kind of hinders that little objective slightly there. You could tell what kind of child I was in school, can't you?
I never did that either. I never did that.
I was the one with the tie that in the final year photo was officially the smallest, and I had all of my friends' names carved and plucked out of it. So.
Oh, mine was 2p, because you used to get pinned all the time. You used to get, I can't remember what they used to call it, but you used to pull your tie and it used to get round your neck like billio. But if you put a 2p in the centre of it, it couldn't do it.
So you become quite ingenious with these things, don't you? We were talking about earlier about uniform. We had this tie meter. We had some teachers that we were the bane of their lives, I'm pretty sure, and they used to go around and they had this stick and it had a level on it and it marked what was an official good length of tie, and they used to come in and everyone would do it, and then the minute they went everyone would put them back. But there was a lad in our class, and I'm small but he was really small, and on the tie meter he used to have his tie down to his knees because everyone had to be the same. And I think this is one of the, I always see these things and I think this is absurd, like why is this happening? And it's one of them moments. It's like, this is just absolutely ridiculous that a child has to have tie down to his knees just so he's conforming.
Oh.
You know?
Yeah.
I did get kind of worried then, Vicky, when you said a teacher used to walk around with a stick. I was like, oh my goodness, is this? I might have to cut this show really short and go, we can't talk about that.
I'm aware of those stories. Keep those stories out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. Remember, you are the fifth panel member out there, and it's just important to get your view as well as ours. Do you think every school should provide a second-hand shop for options for parents to have more options on buying uniform? Do you think we should get rid of uniform altogether, or are you on Gainer's side and feel that it's part and parcel of having a uniform? Have your say. Make sure you have your discussion as well. Our polls will be up by our secretary this week, which is the fabulous Rachel Penny that does it week in, week out. So she'll be putting our polls up this week. So she's got a busy week this week with us, hasn't you, really?
Not really, haven't I?
Moving moving on, we talk about, we've all got quite strong views on this next debate, really, which is quite a controversial debate, but we're gonna have it anyway because we think it's important. So, positive news that firefighters from Billingborough in Lincolnshire and the surrounding villages will take part in a fundraising charity this last weekend in a bid to earn 2 Guinness World Records. There's a sad story to this, so we're not focusing on the charity or the firefighters. We are focusing on why they are doing this in the first place. Unfortunately, there was a terrorist attack around one of their villages near Billingborough, and it made lives and souls devastated. And stories like this keep coming up week in, week out, month in, month out, and year in, year out. And they still, and I'm sure it's a topic that won't be just discussed once. I'm sure we'll discuss it many times, but it did get me thinking. So, Vicky, I'm going to come over to you first. Do you think that our whole justice system, when it comes to crimes like this, like terrorist attacks, needs looking at and rethinking?
Yeah, massively. I think that the big problem is it isn't just about prisons and offences and punishment. I think it's very, you can't box something into that one area. The biggest issue with a lot of these things, and it isn't in every case, nothing is ever black and white, there isn't, either or, but a lot of situations arise from cuts in other areas or difficulties in other areas or personal issues or various things. So there's, you're looking at over the last kind of 11 years, we've had massive cuts to social services, to mental health support, to just all these, crisis support, homelessness, shelters, youth clubs. I mean, there's just been absolute swathing cuts across the board. And the problem with that sort of thing is that, not all cuts are equal. Some cuts, you need to make cuts. You need to cut things that are inefficient. Everybody knows that. But then there's certain things where if you cut something, for instance, like flood defence, you cut flood defence. For every pound you save cutting flood defence, you or spend on flood defence, you earn £8 in the economy because it saves money later down the line. So things like mental health support, youth clubs, all of these, community police officers, getting to know people in the community and what their issues are, and knowing when things are getting out of hand before, that has all gone. So now what we have is a crime punishment system, where it's just people are in these desperate situations. Maybe they've got mental health problems, learning difficulties, maybe they've been abused, maybe they've become homeless, they've lost their home and various things like that. And then, some of them might end up in these situations, turn into crime, to alcoholism, to drug misuse, to all these things that then overcrowds our prisons and causes a bigger problem. And at the minute, I think it's really bubbling up, and I think that more needs to be done to. Prison should be a last resort, it shouldn't be a first port of call for any of these people. There are serious crimes out there. There are people who deserve to be behind bars, there really are. I mean, all of us, not all of us, but I'm sure a lot of us spend far too much time on Netflix watching various documentaries on these things, and there's certain levels of crime really, they need to be dealt with effectively, and they need to be dealt with properly. But the problem is our prisons are currently full of people that shouldn't really have been there, because they should have been stopped or helped, or there should be some kind of rehabilitation process going on, or some kind of, buffer before they hit that wall where they're in prison and where someone's got to that crisis point that they've got into that situation. And I feel that that's the biggest issue we've got at the moment.
Yeah, you find that though, don't you? You find that it's.
Can I just pause you a minute, Rachel? Gaynor, if you're there, just to let you know, we've lost you via camera. We can't.
Yeah, can you hear me though?
Yeah, we can hear you. We've just lost you via camera.
Yeah, 2 seconds. I'll try and get it back. I don't know. It just suddenly said cannot connect. So
okay, thank you. Go on, Rachel. What was you going to say?
I've forgotten what I was going to say now. You interrupted me.
Sorry.
No, not you, Gaynor. It's just like what Vicky was saying. It's like a sticking plaster. You wait for something to happen. It's you wait for something to happen before you try to correct it. and it would cost so much less than it does now, having to sort the problem out after the act. But everything's all so thin on the ground. Like our police, our nurses, our doctors, everything we have to manage with the bare minimum. And then when we get to crisis point, we always get to crisis point really, really quickly. I don't know the statistics, and like Vicky knows more about politics than I ever would. But you know, it just seems to be, to me, ludicrous that especially police. I know some police, and especially down where I live, there is one community PCSO, and she is responsible for the whole of the area around here, even the outlying villages. And that seems ludicrous, because they're just pacifiers. Then they haven't got any police control or anything. They can't arrest. They can just pacify the. There's a lake that's near me, and this PCSO was told to go to this lake to pacify a group of youths. When she got there was more than a group. There was about 30 odd, and she went around that lake by herself and tried to pacify them. And when she was coming out, sort of, a member of the public had called the police to say there's fights breaking out, and she wouldn't have stood a chance. That was one woman on her own, and it didn't matter whether it was a man on his own. But everything's waits to something to happen, and then all that would have kicked off. If there was a few police to go to there, they could have broken it all up, and so nothing would have happened. But this is always the same thing. It doesn't matter whether it's police violence or people on the streets or you know, crime, and they wait for something to happen, so there ends up to be more victims, and more victims to be treated and to have more support. You know, it seems I don't have the answer. It's just my opinion, but it just seems to be a shame that I'm lucky not to be a victim.
Yeah, I think my husband is very passionate about cuts, and you know, as I said, he's ex-Royal Navy, so defence cuts are his sort of big thing. And you know, he was in the Falklands years ago, the Falklands conflict, and even then, you know, he talks about the cuts from then. They were very lucky. They were bombed, but they were in a very old type ship, where some of the new ships didn't fare so well. There'd been cuts in the materials used. The guys that were on board were wearing nylon sweaters instead of wool, so they melted in the fires. You know, and he said that when they were coming back from that sort of conflict down there, their captain was saying, "You must go back and tell everybody what happened, because that's the only way we will deal with the cuts." You know, people have died really unnecessarily because of the defence cuts, because we hadn't been to war, we hadn't done anything for such a long time, that these cuts were being made. So I think even, you know, back as far as the 80s, cuts were being made. And I suppose, have we always been there? It's just that, you know, I don't know, somehow we seem to be hyper alert to everything these days, don't we? Everything just seems to be coming much more to the fore. So yeah.
The thing is, though, it's difficult, isn't it? I feel quite nervous about talking about this topic, because there'll be so many people out there, and so many victims, and so many survivors, and it's a really touchy subject. And as I said, yeah, you're just listening to four people's opinions. That's all it is. We're not political in any way. We're not this. This is just four people giving an opinion. But when it comes,
and everybody wants their pot to be full. That's the difficulty. Everybody has a passion about their pot, and feels the money should be in their pot. So that's another issue that you're dealing with, isn't it? So different sort of passions, I suppose.
But in a sort of way, do you feel like we just rely heavily and I'm not talking about terrorist attack here at any point. I'm talking about the subjects that we've talked about, like mental health and stuff like that. And I've talked many times, I've been down the road of mental health and needing professional help and stuff like that. But I do feel like the UK has lost community spirit, has lost looking out for each other, and it's more about me, myself and I these days, and the inward family. I remember my grandma talking to me about knocking on neighbours' doors just to check if they're okay, and helping elderly out, and looking out for, like, so many things have changed with technology, and I can't complain because Loose Linc is based on technology. But years ago there was no texting system, there was no let's give them a ring. You had to go to a phone box to ring a friend, or you had to make an effort to go and see somebody to see how they're doing and stuff like that. But we just find it so easy to send a text nowadays and just expect that's going to be okay. Do you think that we need to step back a little bit? And I thought COVID had brought us more together. I felt community spirit had come back a little bit, that we were clapping for NHS, that we were looking out for each other, that we were coming together as communities and streets and all of that. And now we're going into the new normal all over again. I feel like we're turning back into a world of selfishness.
Well, that's only because COVID kept us at home. And I think when back in the old days, the communities were a lot smaller. They seem to be a lot smaller, where people used to work in their areas. A lot of people commute now. They come from all over the country just to work in one, cities away. And I think,
that's an example of, I'm living here in Lincolnshire, but my family is over in the northwest. So I think we're all in, that would have been unthinkable years ago, that we moved out of our area. So I think that's probably, you're right. I think it's got a lot to do with it, is that people are much more transient in where they live. So
yeah, they used to live in the same family home for years.
My experience has been the absolute opposite of that. I mean, we moved from the northwest when I was a lot younger, into a village, and there was a bit of taboo with being a northerner back then. If you had a northern accent, it was, you were shunned. It was like, you don't get that anymore. I think because of technology, you're aware that northerners are people too. And I think that wasn't a thing when I first moved down. There was a couple of families that moved down from the north, and they were completely shunned from the village. And I know my mother had moved down, and she really struggled making friends and meeting new people, like really, really struggled, and was very lonely for a long time, until, technology's helped a lot there. Now I live in an amazing little village community, and I'm incredibly privileged to live here because there is an amazing community spirit here. We have our own food bank that's just in the village that we all work towards and provide it. Some of the local businesses donate like little toys and stuff to the different children. We had a load of chefs that came together, and they were cooking meals for people who were still working throughout the pandemic. So they had a hot meal made by a chef, and everyone in the village would donate ingredients. And I had a lady that was coming and getting my medication for me from some of the stuff I couldn't get from the chemist. She was going over to Tesco in Lincoln and dropping it off for me, and it was really, really positive. But that was already there before COVID. It was just amplified in COVID, and it's still kind of there now. So I think there's a big difference between, and there's negatives to it living in a village. When you live in a city, no one knows who your neighbour is. It can be a very lonely place, and you go to the people you know. Whereas in a village, I put a new fence up, and I went to Co-op and I said, just beware, I'm friends with a lady in Co-op, says everyone will be talking about my fence in an hour. And she come round later the next day, she says, everyone's asking about your new fence. So it's ridiculous. Honestly, that's what it's like living in a village. I've had my hedge cut. I bet everyone's been talking about that hedge. Like it's you wouldn't imagine that in a city, that the whole of the village would be talking about someone's hedge,
And last year,
what the kids are doing. The kids are not allowed to be naughty. No, everyone knows. It's all over social media. These Facebook groups. Dog takes a poo somewhere it shouldn't, and everyone knows.
dog poo gate. Everybody talks about dog poo gate, don't they? In the Facebook groups.
We had chip shop mafia wars during COVID. Honestly, people were like, I shop at this chip shop. this chip shop's amazing, you should shop here. And everyone's like, well, I prefer this one. Oh, you can't. I wrote a poem about it based on Lord of the Rings, One Ring to bind them all, but with chip shops, just to diffuse the situation. It really escalated, honestly. It was like, this is ridiculous. It's a chip shop. Go where you like. That's
nice. But let's go back. Let's go back to the story a little bit. Quite controversial question. That's the next question. And Vicky, I'm going to go back to you really. When it comes to crime like this, and crime that devastates loads of lives, and lives are lost and stuff like that, do you think the UK should maybe think about bringing the death sentence back?
I think it's one of those topics that a lot of people have opinions on. It's quite divided. And you know, when I was a lot younger and before I really had researched things and looked into things, I definitely would have said, oh yeah, for the worst people, it's definitely there. But I really disagree with it now. I mean, on the one hand, I think if somebody's done something so heinous that they deserve something like the death penalty, I think that's a get out of jail free card, to be honest. Like, punish them, lock them away, like, you know, take away their privileges and give them support, give them the mental health support or whatever. You know, I really don't think we should be torturing people or anything, you know, but I think the death penalty shouldn't be there. I mean, just look recently, all of the new DNA advances we've had globally, and the amount of people who've been, you know, that come out that have been in prison for like 40 years and it turns out they didn't do it. I mean, even more people have been murdered, you know, had the death penalty, which I do think is murder by the state, and have come out and that they've been innocent, you know. And I think that there is no real closed way of dealing with that without having that chance that somebody might be innocent. And even then, like I said, I think if somebody deserves it, if they've really done the most grotesque crimes out there, I think they should be made to pay and they should be locked up for life. And I do think life should be life. Life shouldn't be 25 years. Shouldn't be getting people out like that guy that raped and murdered those teenage girls shouldn't be allowed to come out after 30 years, because, you know, I think that should be life. And I think that's maybe where we need to go with it, is life should be life, not death.
I agree with that. Life should be life. When you look at the American system and they get 25, I don't see the point in giving somebody 25 life sentences, by the way, but you know, life generally does mean life, doesn't it? And but I think I'm with you in that I think there's been too many cases where it's been wrongful DNA evidence and stuff has come out, and pretty much somebody's been found innocent when it's too late. So you know, I think that's a very scary place to be, and potentially why we don't have the death penalty in this country. I don't know, but you know, I think it is you know, for me, I agree, like, you know, the sentence needs to be harsh. And I think you know, the whole privileges thing of what people get while they're serving a sentence perhaps needs to be looked at, so it feels like they're serving a sentence, you know, rather than you know, if we're looking at the whole judicial system, you know, what do they actually experience when they're in prison? And of course they've had their liberties taken away, but what does it really mean to somebody? You know, what privileges do they have? So
I think if we had this happen to us personally as a family, I think we might think it a little bit differently. We'd want to, what, you know, an eye for an eye, that kind of thing. But as you say, this person has to be found unequivocally guilty, and there's been too many miscarriages of justice. One is too many, and so somebody's have their life taken away from them. It's because they've been found to be guilty, but the punishment is not as I don't know about prison. I don't know exactly what goes on in prison, but it doesn't seem to be the right punishment for the right crime, especially murder. But then again, there's other. You can have other crimes that are committed. It's more like a death sentence to some people anyway. But it does seem just to be too wrong. It seems to be it needs a complete overhaul, I think, the justice system. But as the ladies have said before, that 25 years is not a life sentence at all. My head, my brain still thinks like I was when I was 16, 17. So you're thinking 25 years on, if I committed a crime all those years ago, would I be any different because I'm older?
Definitely.
So
And don't you think though that because I watch the Netflix, there are many other available TV and programs that you can watch, but we'll focus on Netflix a little bit. And when you watch Life, one that's springing to my mind as we talk is Life on Death Row. And I think it's an absolutely fantastic documentary if you haven't watched it, and I really recommend to watch it because it's an eye-opener. But do you think, so you can go on death row and be on death row for 5 years and then be murdered? Killed, sorry, not murdered, executed. Do you think that's almost human torture? Do you think actually if we are sent to death sentence, and I would not want to be that judge, I would not want to be that decision maker on somebody else's life being taken at all, and hats off to the people that do it, because I couldn't do it. Do you think almost though, if you are sent to your death sentence, that it should happen quite quick? It should be done quite quickly, not to delay it. And also, victims on death row, what I watched, the victims of the families and friends and stuff like that can go and watch. Do you think that needs changing a little bit? Do you think actually, okay, the justice is there, the person is being sent to death, but you wouldn't go down the street and watch a murder in the street, would you? If you knew someone was being killed in the street, you wouldn't stand the other side of the road and watch it. Do you think that needs looking at?
Yeah, I do. I don't know why they'll do it. What is the purpose of watching somebody die? It just seems barbaric. But I do think it is slow torture for the person. But to be on death row for 4 or 5 years, is that is the reason for this so they can appeal?
Yeah, there is that appeal system, but it's almost, I don't know why they do it. I don't. But you can. It's almost like you spend time in prison on death row. You spend time in prison, and then eventually you're sent to your death. Now, it's to me, it's very biblical, because just before your death, I feel kind of emotional talking about it, if I'm honest. Before you're sent to death, it's called the Last Supper, and you go for whatever you want. So if you want 3 courses, Sunday lunch, a starter, a dessert, chocolate, sweets, everything's there, and you eat. I don't know how you can eat, to be honest. I won't be able to eat, but you can eat what you like before. But imagine waking up that morning. Imagine waking up the morning you know, I'm going to die today. How horrific that must be.
Yeah, I think, and I suppose people, the waiting time, I agree, with Rachel, is that it's potentially because that's to do with, I suppose, the evidence finding and this beyond reasonable doubt and all that kind of stuff that goes on. But absolutely horrific to wake up and know today's your day. I mean, as they say, we're all going to die sometime, but you don't really know when your ticket machines run out, do you? And and to be in that position there where you wake up, some would say that's part and parcel of the process of punishment, is waking in the morning and having to go through those feelings. I don't know if it feels barbaric to me, a little bit, I don't know.
It's hard, isn't it? It's a hard one to talk about.
It's complex. Yeah, it's complex because on the one hand, you're in the side, you're sort of in the camp of the victims and think, actually, is it barbaric at all? And then on a human to human level, just at that purest human to human level, does that feel right? No, it doesn't. That somebody wakes up and knows that's their final day on Earth. But I agree with you about the eating thing. It's quite bizarre, doesn't it?
But Rachel, do you think? Let's talk about the UK now. So when something happens in even Lincolnshire, hi Lincolnshire, this is why we're here. But do you think that we do enough for victims and their family members after an horrific tragedy on one of their family members or friends? Do you think there's enough support out there afterwards for people like that, or do you think we need to be doing more?
Well, luckily enough, I haven't had to experience that. But like you were saying about mental health, there isn't enough for mental health at all. But what I believe that you can get for victim support, that is 24/7. You can always chat to somebody online 24/7. For traumatic or criminal acts that have happened that have traumatized you. I do believe that because I haven't experienced it, only from what I understand, it is quite a good service, the victim support. But there's you've got to fall into some certain categories, I believe, to access that. But I don't think if for people who've got mental health problems that are just as traumatized, you don't get that. It finishes at 5 o'clock on a Friday night. You don't have to have any problems over the weekend. But with victim support, I believe that it's 24/7 and it's ongoing. And hopefully I don't have to benefit from it.
Yeah.
I think it's quite an emotional night. This is. We've got, there's so much to talk about, and there's so much.
And we could talk forever about it as well.
But it's good that we haven't experienced from it, but we have got opinions, and we're humans, and I just find it quite, like you were saying, you were feeling emotional. I'm going for the floor here. I'm feeling quite depressed.
Yeah, but it's good to talk about. Sometimes, Rachel, we can't be the happy-go-lucky show where we just talk. We have to face these difficult topics that people shy away from, because I think it's really important that if we touch anybody out there that feels like, yes, I feel like this, and I'm not being able to talk. And I think what I want to get from this whole subject is really, to finish on it, is that if you are out there suffering, please reach out. Please talk to people. Please talk to family and friends. We will put the victim support website up on our Facebook page. If any of you want to just have a look into that, see if that would help you in any sort of way. And over the last couple of weeks, I would like to give a shout out and biggest sympathy to anybody that's suffered from 9/11. We send our biggest condolences out to you, and our hearts go out to you. Lots of loose love. But make sure that you have your say on our debates. Do you think it's important that maybe the death sentence comes back to Lincolnshire in the UK? Do you think that victim support needs to be a little bit stronger, or do you think the UK has got that right? Have your say. It's just as important as ours. To finish on our subject this evening, we talk about Lincoln again. Sorry, Lincoln seems to be on the map a little bit this week for Lincolnshire news. Another imp from the Lincoln Imp Trail has been damaged, this time allegedly from a delivery lorry that bumped into the sculpture by the Brayford. Vicky, do you think you should ever take your driving test more than once?
I mean, I have a little problem with road rage. Now, I'm not openly aggressive with it, but I mean, my full vocabulary probably emerges when driving on some of the Lincolnshire roads. I mean, I'd say I'm a very good driver, and I'm not one that normally says I'm good at things. There are 2 or 3 things I'd say I'm good at, and I'd say driving's probably one of them. You know, and I get incredibly frustrated. Like, I understand that there are drivers out there who are reckless and they're terrible. You know, people who drive recklessly for whatever reason, unless it's a genuine emergency, you know, people should slow down and calm down a little bit on that. But the thing that really gets me on Lincolnshire roads is people like driving 30 in a 60 and you can't overtake for like 15 miles, and you sat there and you like just want to, and it drives me mad. It really does. And it's so frustrating. And yeah, I mean, I don't think necessarily there needs to be a test, but I definitely think then it should be maybe like a refresher course, or make it call it something really colourful and exciting, and, you know, make people go down and just like, I don't know, have a refresher and a reminder that, you know, driving too slow is just as bad as driving too fast, you know, and various things like that. Use your indicators before you slow down and turn. Don't use them after you've started turning. You know, just the basics really of those things.
You sound like one of those tom-toms. Use your indicator.
But yeah, I mean, a test, it's a difficult one. You know, I think there's a lot more to that. But maybe people should be more aware, and they should be, you know, encouraged and make it more of a norm to just go and do a little bit of a refresher. And then if anything is screaming out as maybe not great, then it's for them to maybe tackle that.
I don't think it's necessarily an age thing as well. I think there are a lot of, I don't know the statistics really, because I didn't have time to look it up, but I don't know whether it's the younger ones that are causing more accidents or the older ones, but I think any age can have a problem in the car. But my grandmother passed her test. Well, I don't know when she didn't pass a test. She drove a car. She was born in 1910. And she never had to take a test. Before 1934, you didn't have to have a test, and it was brought in 1935. And so anyone who drove a car before that, had a license before that, 1934, didn't have to take a test. And she used to drive a van, her forget-me-not van. She used to be a visiting organiser for the care of the elderly in Lincolnshire. And she used to drive a van, and she got a little bit deaf towards the end, and you could hear her coming up the road, throttling the clutch to death. But I think there should be a reaction test, definitely a reaction test for people. But I don't think it's necessarily an age thing, because I think there are a lot of poor drivers. My husband used to have a little bit of road rage, and he took my mum once on a magical mystery tour of all the trading estates, looking for this chap that had cut him up. And my mum came back blue. Her fingernails were holding onto a seat like this, and she got out. And my husband said to her, "Are you all right, Beach?" And she just said, "Yes." She was frightened to death. He calmed down a lot since after that, but it was a bit of a wake-up call.
My mother-in-law is 91 this year, and prior to COVID, she would very much still be an active driver. So she was the designated sort of hospital visitor. She drove people to church and back, and you wouldn't have definitely known that she was in her 90s. And I think had there been a test in place that she had to retake, I think that would have really drawn a line in the sand of her driving. She probably wouldn't have felt confident in going taking another test. But I agree, a reaction test is a great idea, because whether young or old, reactions, hazard perception, all that kind of stuff is vital, I suppose, as part of the driving skills. But she would still be driving now. Sadly, I don't think she's necessarily going to drive again. I think she spent too long now not behind the wheel because of the COVID situation and not going anywhere, which is, I suppose, another story of how it's limiting limiting people's activities, but she very much I think is I think the epitome of somebody that's still living life and would have been out there driving, but probably wouldn't have been happy to take a test again. Who is happy to take a test again? I wouldn't want to take one.
I wouldn't.
I'd rather not. None of us, I don't think, are confident we would pass.
Well, it's a thing. It's a New Year thing for me. I've never been behind a wheel, and I am so doing it in the new year. I'm fed up now. I'm 31 years old, and I need to be on the road. But I'm sure Rachel will tell me when you're on the road, Nick. Please ring me because I'll make sure I'm off the road. She would say something like that. Rachel, do you think there should be an age by law that you are forced to stop driving?
No, I think you possibly you could have like I said earlier, a reaction test at a certain age, and have it renewed every couple of years. Thing is, I have a condition where I have to have my driving license renewed every 3 years, and so medication can make a difference, conditions can make a difference, and I'm not 91, Nick, or 85, or my grandmother was still driving at that
but
age.
Listening to Gaynor, Rachel, there's still hope for you.
Yeah, but the thing is, you see, I could be numbed by medication, and so you know, if people drive with alcohol or drugs in the system, they're taken off the road. So you have to be careful with people that are taking medication as well. So you know, it's not a cut and dried thing. It's not just
it's not just about age. It's about lots of other factors, isn't it, that come into play.
Yes, yeah.
I think the point's going to be moot pretty soon. I mean, just look at Tesla self-driving cars at the moment. I think that's also something that's possibly an option in the future, is that, you know, at a certain point, whether you do reaction tests, whether some people want to drive or what, you know, whether that is an option, that certain people don't lose their freedom, then that they have the option then to have a self-driving car, which would take that out of the...
My cousin's got one of those cars, and they've programmed it to fart when they go around it, when they indicate.
Wow.
So it farts. That's one of the little perks.
Rachel, you didn't say that in the green room. For that.
We used to have Joanna Lumley on the sat nav, and she used to, every time she'd be like, "Oh, fabulous, darling, you've reached your destination," and it was wonderful. You know, I'd probably lean that way rather than the other. But, you know, each to their own.
Gaynor, we come to you for our final question. We have the privilege of having Gaynor as a new panellist, but she comes as a partnership. We have her husband in 2 weeks' time coming on the show, so you'll meet Gaynor's husband. But Gaynor, would you ever tell David, you're a really bad driver?
Yeah. Don't even need to think about it. Yeah, why wouldn't I? No, actually, David is quite a good driver. Shh, don't tell him I said that. But and I'm lucky. He tends to sort of chauffeur me about. He's quite the gentleman. I get driven about everywhere, but that doesn't mean that I sort of stick my sort of two penneth in, as they say, saying, slow down, why did you pull out then, let him know where you're turning, put your indicator on. So
you know what it reminds me of? Hyacinth Bouquet.
I've been called that before plenty of times.
I just think you're Anne Robinson.
It's when somebody grabs hold of my honker I don't like. When you're hooting, get off my honker, this is my car, I'm driving, you're not.
David shouts at me because I tend to mess about on the phone.
So inappropriate, honestly. That sounded so inappropriate. Would you tell though a family or friend member? Would you be brave enough to say you need to work on your driving?
I think it depends who it is. You know, I got in the car the other week with my son, who's coming up for 21, and you know, never again. You know, I sort of nearly risked my sort of life as we know it going to Tesco's because, you know, never made it back with the milk. But, you know, so it depends who it is, really. I think we're allowed to be opinionated more with some people than others. And also it depends whether they decide they won't drive you again.
Yeah,
So you might want to keep your opinions to yourself. But I think seriously, if somebody was acting dangerously, then I would have no problem saying to them, you know, that's really, you know, really scary. You know, so I think it depends what it is. And who it is, and you know, I'm being tongue in cheek really with. I'm not being tongue in cheek with my son. That was really like scary, but I am, you know, with David. He's generally a good driver. I just think it's a husband and wife thing, isn't it? What husbands and wives do. So,
it's in the marriage vows.
Yeah. I promise to always criticise your driving.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We'll question David about it in 2 weeks. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Tell us what you guys think, though. Would you ever tell a family or friend member that you're a bad driver and you need to work on it? Do you think there should be an age limit to being behind a wheel? And do you think we should take our driving tests more than once? And would you pass it? Unfortunately, that brings us to the end of this week's Loose Linc show. It's been an incredible show, and I've had the privilege of talking to these three people. The person that will always stand by uniform and never be dismayed from it, that's Gaynor Ronson. The person that has fresh language every time she's behind a wheel, that's Vicky Pearson. And also, never touch her honker because she will have something to say. That's Rachel Penny. Join us next week. There'll be a brand new panel, hot debates, and all of that. Thank you for letting us keep you entertained this Tuesday. Good night, God bless, and we'll see you next week. Good night.
Bye.